things that don't align with your moral compass will eat away at your soul. And I think a lot of the guys that really do have PTSD, I think they either saw or did something that didn't agree with their moral compass. And for a lot of the guys who went to Afghanistan, it was working with pedophiles day in, day out, and not being able to do anything about it.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 331. I'm talking to Danny Wolf, who was were you in the Army or the
Marine Corp.
Marine Corps for for several years, and he did a tour in Afghanistan, and he's goes by the name of American Visigoth, and talks about we're going to talk about what he saw during his time in Afghanistan and during his tour of duty. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah. First, Danny, I'll just start from the beginning. So I assume you joined the Marines right out of high school, or pretty much close to that.
Yeah, yeah, right after graduation.
Yeah. Where were you from before? Where did you grow up, if you don't mind?
Wyoming.
Oh, Wyoming. Yeah, very rural state. So you ended up in the Marines, and I assume you must have went probably to San Diego to train instead of Paris Island. Then where did you? And this was in 2005, you said.
Yeah, right at the height of the war.
Okay, 2005. Just as what was your feeling back at that time? Because at least based on my experience, a lot of guys who go into the military out of high school are pretty much apolitical. They're not even thinking about it. They're just you know, but it's definitely a change. So what was your motivation to go into the Marines at the time?
For the same as pretty much everyone in my generation, 9/11. We saw what happened on 9/11 live in school. Every single one of us watched it happen live on TV. So we were watching the bodies bouncing off the concrete. We were all pissed. We all wanted to go and punish someone for it.
Yeah. Of course, being in Wyoming, you would have been 2 hours behind the World Trade, 2 hours behind New York City, but still, yeah. Yeah, I was out of school. I can imagine what that was like, though, if you were to be in school on that day. I was yeah, I remember being in school when Pope John Paul was shot, but that was the only thing that really happened when I was in school, but so a lot of you saw that, and a lot of, you probably weren't the only one who went into the military after high school then, were you?
No, that's why a lot of us call ourselves Generation Revenge.
Oh, I can see that, yeah, and of course, being in Wyoming, I bet it was probably a pretty small school, wasn't it?
I was in Casper, so it's decent size. We had two big high schools in the town.
Yeah.
Uh, it's, it was a pretty good sized school, and most of us had to get in there early and wait. So we were all in the cafeteria watching it at about probably half hour after it happened.
Oh, yeah. Probably the teachers were just as much into it. I mean, nobody really felt like doing school that day. You just wanna figure out what the heck's happening here. I can imagine. So you joined after you graduated high school, and then you went into Marines, and so what was your first assignment after your, 13 weeks of basic?
Full infantry because I decided to be a grunt.
Okay. Where'd you go? Where'd you go?
Did SOI, actually East Coast. The last year that I was in high school, I stayed with my mom out in Ohio. So I actually went Paris Island, went school infantry East Coast at Camp Lejeune, and then got stationed on the West Coast in San Diego.
Okay, yeah, yeah. My brother, I'm originally from West Virginia. He went to Paris Island. And it's usually, East Coast goes to Paris Island, West Coast goes. So when did you end up going abroad or going to a foreign land?
So my last deployment, which is probably the most important one, was 2010, 2011, which would have been in the Helmand province.
Helmand Province. That's in Afghanistan.
Correct.
That's just want to look this up. Helmand Province. Yeah. So when did you? So when did you first go to Afghanistan. And were you anywhere else besides Afghanistan outside the country?
I've been deployed to Iraq too, as well as a few MEUs, Marine Expeditionary Units, which isn't really a deployment, so much more of a vacation cruise. But
Oh,
yeah, my last tour was in Helmand Province in 2010 to 2011, and that is where the origin of the tweet that went uh, viral on Twitter was from. Um, our primary job when we first got there was, clearing out insurgents because it was a hotbed, and it was in a valley that was full of poppy, which was their primary funding at the time. And on the backside was advising the local partner forces, coalition partner forces, to prep them to take over because right before we deployed there, Obama had gone on TV and basically said that we'd be withdrawing in 2014, which told everyone in the area that we were going to, hey, we're only going to be here for a few more years, and then the Taliban's probably going to come back. So it ruined a lot of our potential to win over the locals to our cause or to work with us because they knew that the clock was already counting down to us leaving.
yeah,
So we're there trying to build up a network of human intelligence and get local Afghanis as police and Afghani National Army, the ANAs, trying to get them to buy into this bullshit government that we forced on them. We chose two people that we knew would be our puppets to be the only two possible candidates that they could have to vote between for rulership. So the guy who was actually in charge of the provisional government we set up, which was essentially democracy at the barrel of a gun, was a puppet for the Northern Alliance that was our partner forces, right?
yeah,
Everyone in Afghanistan either is Taliban or is on the Taliban side. It's not some organization that you have to seek out and join up. It's
yeah,
an idea. If you resist foreign occupation, you're Taliban. If you hang a white flag outside your house, you're Taliban. So the only people in the entire country that we could find that would join an outside occupation was the Northern Alliance, which is your pedophiles, your drug lords, your warlords that the Taliban pushed out in the 90s, back in 1994. They were bloodthirsty murderers. They massacred the civilian population, enslaved little boys, ran the opium industry. So the Taliban were actually created by a guy named Omar in the 90s with 30 men. The first reason the Taliban existed was to go rescue a young girl who'd been kidnapped by the Northern Alliance, by the chieftain warlords. And because they succeeded in getting her and bringing her back to her family safely, the people of Afghanistan, a lot of them as heroes, and gave them a lot of support. They were able to recruit a lot more people, get more weapons, more funding, and they continued to go rescue kids from the warlords until they were able to get enough momentum to actually seize power in Kandahar and Kabul and then the whole country. So they are the freedom fighters that the Taliban, that the people of Afghanistan look up to. And while there are rapists and pedophiles in the Taliban, just because of the region and the cultures, the Taliban do not approve of that. If you get caught, you are screwed. If you hurt a kid in the Taliban and they find out, you are done. They're probably going to kill you.
yeah,
So while we're there, we didn't know some of this history until later. We're 18 years old. We're just kids. We get a few months workup to prepare for this deployment. Squad tactics, mountain warfare school, a
yeah,
few phrases in Pashto that we could barely remember to tell people to stop or we'll shoot, things of that nature.
yeah,
And the world's shortest crash course in the regional history. We didn't know about all these different tribes and their backgrounds and their customs and how it all worked until we got there on the ground. Um, so we're dealing with all these clashing tribes who all live in a feudalistic culture where if I run over your dog, I have till sunset to bring you a new dog or let you run my dog over, or we have a blood feud, right?
Yeah.
So these kids, we started coming across every time we had these little patrol bases, PBs that we operated out of in the front, way forward of the fobs. And as we started to take more ground and stabilize the area, we started to hand off some of these patrol bases to the ANAs and the police. And they would work out of that PB, this little patrol base that we had handed off to them, which would become a police station or a small armory for the ANAs. And it's what their headquarters would be. And they each had a district for ANAs and Afghani police where they would operate in that district out of that PB. Well, we started seeing kids in the PBs when we'd go to check on these guys, training them up on the basics, providing them with beans, bullets, fuel, and all that stuff so that they can operate effectively. We started reporting it because we learned what bajabazi were, the T-boy, the shy boys. We started to learn what that was, and we were reporting it, but the reports would always go nowhere. We'd report it up the command, and I don't know where the disconnect is. I don't know if it's at the field grade level or if it's back in Washington, but it became common knowledge among us that any report about alleged pedophilia among our partner forces was always going to be a dead end because those were the only guys that we had.
Yeah.
And, these guys would go on Hajj randomly and disappear for 6 months and come back, and you couldn't fire them. You still had to pay them. And half the time during their Hajj, their pilgrimage, it was a lie. They were actually going and fighting with the Taliban against us, playing both sides. But we had to keep paying them anyway. You can't fire them because there's nobody to replace that guy with, right? So we're noticing all these bachabazi and we're reporting it, nothing's happening. We're training these guys up to basically govern, police, and defend the entire country. They speak a different language than the rest of the country, and they are the age-old enemies. When you talk about Mahmoud and these guys, they murdered tens of thousands of civilians, and the people of Afghanistan haven't forgotten that because at the time, this was only 20 years after that had happened. So we're putting these mass murderers in charge of the country. People hated them and knew all about the practice of bajabazi.
Yeah.
Um, so the command finally, I don't know if they'd already had the rule in place or if they just finally decided to talk about it, says, you're not allowed to have minors in these PBs overnight. They didn't say you couldn't have them in there at all because they knew that that would never work. It would never um, be listened to. We can't enforce it anyway, but they knew that they couldn't tell these guys to not kidnap little boys.
Yeah.
So they settled for telling them that they couldn't have them in the PB with them at night and raping them.
Yeah.
So our job was to tell them, hey, we know you've kidnapped little boys, but you can't keep them here in this PB we gave you overnight. You can't rape them, as
Yeah.
if they're going to listen to that. So every time we would come to a PB, they knew ahead of time when we were coming out because the command would let them know. So they would just hide the kids somewhere. They'd move them around. Or they would get clever and they would strip all the defenses down from the PB so that we couldn't stay overnight, so that we'd have to leave before dark, and then they'd bring the kids back. Like they'd strip all the sea wire down, sell it in the bazaar for scrap. They'd strip all the defenses because if there's no security, then we're not allowed to stay there because it's unsafe, and they knew that.
Yeah.
They're doing all this stuff, it's a cat and mouse game, and we're constantly two steps behind them because our hands are tied behind our back, and the command is warning them before we come out every time.
Yeah.
Now, it would always be inferred that they were just giving them a heads up that we're en route so that they know vehicles are going to be approaching for safety. But there was always this belief amongst us that the other reason that they were linking up with them on the comms while we were en route is to let them know, hey, go hide those kids before the Marines get there. And it's going on. It's happening. They're pedophiles, and there's nothing you can do about it. We reported it over and over just to be the thorn in the side of the command.
Yeah.
Because if I can't fucking kill these guys for being pedophiles, if I can't get them arrested, at least I can be a pain in the ass to my command and let them know I'm not cool with this. At least I can make it difficult, right? Because you'd have moms and grandmas coming up to you crying, talking to you through the terp, translating that, hey, my son or my grandson was kidnapped by the police here, the ones that you've trained. Please go get him back for me. And you got to deal with seeing that on a regular basis and know what's going on,
Yeah.
working with fucking pedophiles.
Yeah, so, what specifically, what for people who aren't familiar with the term bacha-bazi, what exactly is bacha-bazi or bacha-baza? Yeah.
So the term is chai boy or tea boy. The idea is that they serve tea. Um, it's a common practice in Pakistan, Afghanistan. It was also very common in the Ottoman Empire.
Mhm.
Back in the day, what would happen is when they conquered a tribe or they conquered a country, those people would pay a tithe every year in boys. They'd send the smartest, best looking boys, they'd come and take them and capture them and bring them back, uh, school them as entertainers or jesters and sex slaves,
Wow. And so what's the age range on these boys usually?
7 and up. Usually 7 to 12, 7 to 10
Okay.
is the most common.
7 to 12, so we're talking about boys who really have no idea what's going on, yeah, and can't possibly defend themselves.
Exactly.
Do any of these boys ever escape, or is it usually just somebody has to rescue them?
Most of the time, no, but some of them did. A lot of the ones that escaped would actually escape and join the Taliban. Um, because the Taliban weren't exactly the good guys. They're definitely the lesser of the evils, though. And the Taliban wouldn't let people get away with doing this to these boys. So while there were some pretty shady guys in the Taliban, since the practice was outlawed, they were a lot safer with the Taliban than they were with our partner forces. So they would run off and join the Taliban and try to get revenge on the ANAs and PB commanders, their captors. And then a lot of times what would happen is they would escape being a sex slave, being imprisoned by one of these PB commanders, run off, join the Taliban. Taliban would try to help them get revenge and kill the PB commander, and then we would get involved in a firefight, and the kid would end up dying because he is in mixed in with the Taliban shooting at us.
Yeah, so and, looks like there's several different languages and assume different ethnicities, and, I mean, when you have mountainous areas, I mean, people are always very divided. I mean, there's Pashto, Dari, Uzbek, uh, Turkmen, even Urdu, and a few others. What groups in Afghanistan were doing this? Was it one language or one group, or was it just kinda all different kinds of groups? Was there anything that
As far as the Bachabazi
Yeah, as
practice,
far as the bacha-bazi practice, yeah.
as predominantly these northern tribes. Now, they're northern tribes now mainly because they were pushed that direction by the Taliban. So it's a
Okay,
loose confederation of people, but it's a lot of these northern tribes, which is why we call them the Northern Alliance. The
okay,
area that I was in was a bunch of Pashtun tribes.
yeah,
So the Pashtun tribes, the civilian population, didn't speak the same dialect as these northern tribes that we had
yeah,
brought in to take over. So they didn't speak the same language, they didn't have the same culture. Just within the district and province where I was at was also individual tribes
yeah,
with their own individual histories and feuds. The reason why no one can really control Afghanistan outside of the Taliban, no one's ever really been able to conquer it, aside from the terrain, is the human landscape, the human terrain. You have so many loose confederations of tribes that the possibility of getting a cohesive, centralized government is really difficult to act out. Um, Getting all of these people to agree and live together and not kill each other, it's a lot like the whole Arab Spring thing, and trying to unify the Shiites and the Sunnis without having them kill each other. The only way that it's happened in our recent history is with the Taliban having unilateral support because of the reason why they went into being, and that a lot of them were former mujahideen, former resistance fighters who had fought the Soviets,
Yeah.
and then being the heroes in the 90s, so they became a little bit mythological, and the tribes were able to put aside their petty differences to back one group because of that reason. It's also that the Taliban's made up of people from all over Afghanistan. It's made up from people in each tribe. So every tribe sort of has a representative within the Taliban.
Yeah, and as Scott Horton once said, Afghanistan is where empires go to die, and really this goes all the way back to Alexander. It's this is an area that's never been conquered, very, very mountainous. Was it pretty high up there? I mean, did you experience any is it high enough that you might experience some altitude sickness, or was it still, I mean, what was the elevation there generally about, even in the valleys or the tops of the mountains?
It's a it's a high desert, so it's pretty similar to like Mojave in California,
Okay,
the like 29 plains or 29 palms. It's a
29.
high desert. Um, the air's thinner, yet you look in certain places and you have that moonscape, kind of like Iraq, but then you'll have tree lines and woods,
Yeah.
a lot of canals, a lot of farms there actually are fed by canals, so you'll spend most of your days wading through waist deep water. It's interesting landscape, it's contrasts.
Well, Kabul is over, 58,000 feet or 17 almost 1,800 meters, so that's pretty high up, about the same as, say, Denver or Albuquerque, so,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so it's pretty hard, but obviously there's this is part of the Himalayas, so there's got some really high mountains there. I It's something I've always observed, though, no matter where you go, some of the toughest people to defend their lands are the people in the mountains, whether it be Switzerland or the Caucasus region or any place like this. Th They don't fight offensive wars, but you go fight on their turf, you'll probably lose. Uh, so who do you what was the justification for your commanders just ignoring this and whitewashing this?
So we wouldn't even get one.
Yeah,
And what would happen is you would inform your chain of command, uh, squad leader, platoon sergeant, whoever, and they wouldn't push it on up, and then it would just go nowhere. Um, Nobody would ever blatantly tell you this report's not going to go anywhere because that would have implications that could get them in trouble. It was never expressly said in those specific words because they wanted to cover their own ass. Um, they would basically try to say verbally that we needed to enforce the SOP and then kind of hint that, it probably won't work. They would gesture with words toward it being part of their culture while saying that we can't allow them to do it. But if you asked about a report you'd filed, you'd just be given the runaround endlessly. And I mean, I got out as a sergeant as an E5, so I was a nobody. Um, all the guys underneath me were less of a nobody even than I was. So we didn't have a whole lot of leverage anyway to push on anybody. Yeah, I wasn't going to be going into my CO's office and giving him these hard questions because I didn't have any rank. He probably wouldn't even let me come talk to him anyway. I would talk to my platoon sergeant about it, and he'd get pretty candid with me when we were one on one. But these guys would always shut up as soon as there was more Marines around. So you get the truth out of them one on one, man to man. But the moment there's other troops on deck, they're going to go right back to the party line of the command.
yeah, just we don't interfere. I forgot, what's SOP?
Standard operating procedures.
Standard operating procedures. Okay, okay, thank you.
So like that's the terminology we used for it. I don't know what the specific nomenclature would actually be. It's not a regulation because the partner forces aren't part of the US military. So it's not a regulation as far as the outlawing of Bachabazi. But we just called it an SOP.
Yeah, standard operating procedure, so nothing happened. Was there anybody higher up talking about this, or were they all just just turning their heads the other way and acting like it wasn't happening?
Anyone above the rank of like captain or major just pretended it didn't happen. The U.S. ambassador and the British ambassador that were out there pretended it didn't happen.
Yeah.
They pretended that our partner forces were these shining examples to the rest of the country and that everything was great. And we'd completely defeated the Taliban and pushed them out of the AO, and it was a safe place to be. Yeah, they were. I don't know if they were living in an alternate reality where they actually believed these things coming out of their mouth, or if they're just straight up lying. But how they would act like the situation was on the ground that they were observing when they would come out and do their little dog and pony show visits
Yeah.
versus the actual reality right outside the PB, right outside the wire, was night and day. So I don't know how much of that was talking points from Washington and London, and how much was just them protecting their own career and reputation.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you found out that yeah, the media certainly promoted a lot of myths about the Taliban. What are some of the things that turned you found out that weren't true about the Taliban?
Um, the idea that Americans had that this was some sort of organization with a hierarchy, it's just a bunch of random people that hate being invaded by another country. It's just random villagers that decide, I don't want foreigners here in my backyard. I don't like being invaded. I'm Taliban. You know, you might have a guy who works with you as an asset, but his brother is fighting against you and the Taliban just due to the different circumstances that they live in. It's not like the Al Qaeda where you have, a figurehead at the top so much and a structure to it.
Yeah.
It's just a loose affiliation of people that have never been conquered and never intend to be. Um, they were probably better to the people than I had thought that they would be, or that the average American would think that they are. I don't want to paint them as good. They're not. There's no good guy in this story. That's the thing. Um, it's two evils, each fighting each other, thinking they're the greater good, essentially. But they were the lesser of the evils by far. Um, when I watched Kabul fall after Biden pulled everyone out, initially I was pretty pissed because my brothers bled a lot of blood to take that ground.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it as the years went by, I decided the Taliban cannot be any worse than the people we left in charge of that place. You know, they're not good to women. The women's rights are practically non-existent. They treat them like a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
So it's not an ideal situation whatsoever. But at least the majority of them are not out kidnapping and raping boys. Um, they're not extorting, blackmailing, and scamming the population as much. Like I'm sure there's corruption. There's always corruption in these areas. But the Northern Alliance, it wasn't just how much they were sexually abusing the youth. It was also they were all criminals. Um, we would give them weapons and ammunition and vehicles so that they could take over defending and protecting and serving the populace, and they would steal it all. They would sell it instead of utilizing it, or they would strip pieces of it and sell it. And then the next time you'd visit them, they'd say, "Hey, this is ineffective. It's broken. I need a new one." And you'd say, "I just gave you this. Where is this?" And they would make up some bullshit. It was always a scam. The ANAs and the APs that we would work with would shake down the locals for cigarettes and money, or blackmail them, or they'd falsely accuse them of being Taliban just because they had a grudge with them, and then they'd arrest them as Taliban, but they would ransom them to their family. And we would have to explain, like, hey, arresting someone doesn't mean you can ransom them off like a kidnapping. That's not how this works. But you can't teach them these concepts because they're so backward that something like Miranda rights or probable cause is
Yeah.
a high concept that their brain can't comprehend. You know, they're illiterate. So
Yeah.
you give them laptops in their language, in Pashtun or whichever dialect they spoke,
Mhm.
and they would sell the laptop because they couldn't use it because even though it's in their language, they're illiterate.
Yeah.
The only literate people that I came across were Taliban.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
like the few people whose family were wealthy enough to send them off to Oxford for college were literate, and the imams are all Taliban, of course. So all of the education is predominantly done through the religion
yeah,
there, and the imams are the few people that can read and write. They're teaching them the Quran and which parts of it to focus on.
yeah.
Uh, some of the villages we went to was so backward that you'd have a guy that every week he'd run to the next village to get the news, run back and yell it out because nobody could read.
Wow.
So
And
that's what you were dealing with both with the local civilian population and with the guys that we'd put in charge of everything, the outsiders. So it was just a mess, you know. They would find someone they had a feud with and they would just say he's Taliban with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. And they would just go arrest this guy, or they'd arrest someone who was friends with or related to someone in the Taliban. Because you couldn't explain to them the concept that you can't arrest someone based on collective guilt, because
mhm,
they pretty much believe in collective guilt there.
yeah.
Someone in your family does something to them, they're going to hold your whole family responsible. So in their way of thinking, they can just arrest anyone with your last name as punishment for a crime.
Wow, yeah.
So
I
it was a mess trying to navigate all of this and trying to skip from a third world civilization that lives basically in the Stone Age to 21st century in one deployment. You know, it would take generations to do what the project actually was. What the
well,
goal of Washington and NATO and the UN, their goals, or excuse me, not NATO, but United Nations. Um, the goals that they had for Afghanistan were very ambitious and cannot be accomplished within my lifetime or my son's lifetime or my grandson's lifetime. It's just not possible.
they wanted to build the new
Nope.
yeah. I'm also going to assume, giving laptops to people who probably didn't even have electricity in their houses. I mean, yeah.
Some of them did. The PBs we usually had wired up or they had a generator or something, you know. Uh, the sad thing bringing up electricity, most of them didn't, but the more peaceful these areas got due to our presence and due to pushing the Taliban back during that time,
Mhm.
people would start wiring their houses up with electricity, but they didn't know that it would be a good idea to come let us know they're going to do that and that they might do it at nighttime. And we would think that they were digging in IEDs.
Oh,
And the next thing you'd know, they'd end up dead, and now their whole family becomes Taliban in retaliation.
wow. So, yeah, it's a pretty, obviously, there was a lot of, I I'm assuming there were very few people there who spoke English, but how many people in your troop could actually speak the language and talk to these people?
Zero. We all had Terps that were assigned to us who were from the region. They may not be from the specific province that you're
Yeah.
working, but you'd have a Pakistani or an Afghani.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times they would be connected to the same warlord chieftains in the Northern Alliance. So a lot of your Terps that you're using to communicate with the people are someone that the people hate because they know what they're a part of. So a lot of these guys that are going to the UK right now, these 20,000 guys that each have like 20 kids and three wives,
Yeah.
these guys that are coalition partner forces, a lot of them were Terps
Okay.
who are some part of the military or government. And so the email leak that they're worried about, it's the Taliban seeing, hey, these 20,000 guys worked for the United States in the coalition partner forces and the government and the ANAs as a Terp, whatever, fighting us 15 years ago. So the guys that are being sent to the UK right now, these 20,000, they're all fighting age males. Some of them have actually been in combat with us against the Taliban. And they're all part of the same group of guys that pride themselves on pedophilia.
Yeah. Uh, you talk about you talk about men with multiple wives. What does I assume some of the rich people are marrying more than one wife, and the other thing too is how young are some of these marriages happening?
It
How young are
varies.
the people getting
Um,
married? Yeah.
it varies by the locale. I I never physically saw someone married to a 9-year-old girl, but I saw plenty of guys married to women that were very young. They're not a woman, they're a girl. It was commonplace because the custom there is all based on the Quran, on the teachings of Muhammad. And Muhammad was very comfortable with child marriage. So they they don't have things like age of consent there. They don't even really have much of a concept of consent at all. These are things that are foreign to them. So child brides is very common there. Um, but a lot of the guys that are getting sent to the UK, you'll see they have 15 dependents because, even if they have one wife, they'll pop out 14 kids because that's the wife's only job. One of the things that we ran into a lot in Afghanistan, especially with the partner forces that we worked with, a lot of them see a woman as a breeding incubator, that's her only purpose. And then they use boys for pleasure. So if you're horny, you fuck kids. You only fuck your wife to make more babies. That's the culture. And that's what the UK is importing right now.
Yeah, the UK is importing that. It's really uh, wild what's happening. Yeah, and so what do most of the people do there? Are they just small farmers? Are they herders? Or what do
It's
they do to
all
survive?
it's all subsistence farming
Yeah,
predominantly. You'll come across the rare occasion where someone has really old farm equipment, but most of it's very early agrarian society. It's not really industrialized yet.
yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a guy that we questioned because we found him in an area where we'd had something pop off, and he told us he was a rock farmer, or at least that's how the Terp worded it or something. And at first we thought he was joking. We realized this guy being a fucking smartass. But his job was literally to go collect rocks for other farmers so that they could build walls with them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's how far backward you're going in development. Iraq actually is a developed nation compared to Afghanistan by comparison.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I suppose these people didn't even have hoes or rakes or and certainly not tractors, I suppose.
I think I saw one tractor the whole time I was there, and last I heard, it had ran over an IED while it was being used.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the little bit of innovation they finally get access to ends up either being stolen, vandalized, or blown up,
Yeah.
or cannibalized to repair something else because they don't really have any kind of an infrastructure. So like vehicles, anything that requires maintenance either just breaks down and degrades because they don't have the education or the manpower to maintain these things, or they don't have access to the parts to keep it running. So like in Kajaki, there's this huge dam in the river there that was a hydroelectric dam that pretty much produced electricity for the entire valley there for thousands of people. And it was constructed, I want to say, in the 1960s as part of America trying to resist the spread of communism by helping develop other nations, by pumping money into these other nations.
Yeah.
And one of those nations was Afghanistan. So in the 60s, we dumped a lot of money into trying to develop and innovate Afghanistan to get them to choose our side over the Soviet Union. And Kajaki Dam was probably one of the more expensive projects involved in that. And when you look at it today, it's completely inoperational. And there's not even any people in Afghanistan that are trained up on how to fix it. If we fixed it for them and got it running again, they wouldn't be able to keep it running. So you can pump a lot of money into Afghanistan. We certainly did while I was there, countless money and trillions of dollars. And you might as well set it on fire. Every innovation that you introduce is so far ahead of what they're capable of handling or maintaining or repairing that it's just going to degrade the moment you're not there to maintain it. It's kind of like the railroads and infrastructure in Africa after apartheid collapsed. All the Europeans that had built all that, maintained it, it all crumbled and fell apart the moment they left.
Yeah, I know a guy who, said the same thing about when the British left India. So we've got people who is it like the 1800s, like the 1700s? I mean, what kinda homes do they have? I mean, do they at least have wood and build some homes, or what kinda or are they just shacks, or what do they live in there?
So they're crude clay and mud brick homes, similar to what you'd see in any rural area in the Middle East.
Okay.
They make homes that are little compounds made out of clay brick, um, which sucks to fight and clear in because you punch a couple holes through the wall with a sledgehammer, and now you got a keyhole to shoot at me through. Um, it's similar to a lot of other areas in the Middle East in that most of these homes would have like a little mud brick wall around them with a metal doors. So every time you went into one of these places, you'd have to clear the outer compound and then the house itself. But they're very crude, and in some of the more far out rural areas, it's essentially a mud hut. Um, you got goat farmers and things like that. So it's kind of a mix between almost a Bronze or Iron Age era and a little bit of 18 to 1900s.
Yeah, maybe something like Little House on the Prairie, or perhaps even before Little House on the Prairie, but, uh, I do they even use horses or not?
Yes, not as much as they used to back in the 90s. The horse fighting is kind of their history, and the Taliban uh, kind of took on that mythos of being horse-mounted warlords. Um, I didn't see a whole lot of horses in the area where I was at. I didn't see any Taliban riding in on a horse trying to shoot at me.
Yeah,
But that is kind of the culture that they built on. You could think of that as sort of like part of their founding mythology.
yeah. Or do they also maybe have, cows or chickens or or turkeys or anything like, or maybe they don't, I don't, it's hard to say what they're doing or anything like.
It's a lot of sheeps and goats,
Okay.
the occasional cow. The cows were rare and kind of like a prize. We actually had them intentionally lead a cow into our sea wire because they knew that we'd have to pay them a bunch of money for it, even though they did it on purpose. It was weird. They would rather have the money from scamming us than just do the work. And I don't want to say that all of them were like this, but a lot of them.
Mm,
The work that they would put into these scams and schemes they would run would sometimes be more work than just doing an honest day's labor.
yeah.
But it's sort of like they have a two-tiered moral system
Mhm.
where they have one set of morals for them and another set of morals for outsiders. So like getting one over on us, the foreigners, is seen as an honorable thing, a fun little game that is celebrated. But they wouldn't necessarily do the same thing to each other because it would be considered dishonorable.
Well, you're also considered the rich American who has everything and they have nothing, which is
Yeah.
part is at least to some degree true. I assume also you probably I assume the soldiers now and then would probably get offered sex now and then from the women or not.
I mean, with us not speaking the language and usually we've got our gun up and are doing work or we're holding perimeter while one of our higher ups is having a sit down meeting with a local village elder or something. So there wasn't really much opportunity for that anyway. And I don't know if you've seen any of the average women out in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan, but they're not exactly attractive. There's no such thing as deployment goggles in Afghanistan.
Okay, yeah. Uh, well, was how much better was it in Kabul, or were you there in Kabul all that much? I mean, obviously it's a city, it's got an airport, of course.
I didn't get to spend very much time there because I was pushed out pretty far away from it. Um, Obviously, much better than where I was at and where a lot of the more rural parts are. However, 2001 after 9/11, one of the first things we did was, mass bombing in Kandahar and Kabul.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of the infrastructure of Afghanistan was actually bombed into dust in 2001 as part of the airstrike campaign.
Oh, were
A
you?
lot of the only things there that were worth anything we blew up.
Yeah. Were you ever close to where Bin Laden was, or because this was initially the justification for going into Afghanistan, as they were harboring Bin Laden.
I mean, I'll never know because I wasn't important enough to be privy to the information that the spooks were talking about. Maybe at some point he was near where I was, but probably not. Um, the thought is that he'd probably been in Pakistan for quite some time, so probably not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we've covered Afghanistan pretty much. I am curious. What was? How long were you in Iraq, and what was going on there? When and when?
So this would have been late '05. So after the really exciting stuff had popped off, Bush and First Battle of Fallujah and all that. Um, that was a very different war in that it was more gunfights. There was still IED threats, but the enemy was the holdouts and leftovers of the Ba'athist Party and
Yeah,
the leftovers of the Fedayeen and all of that.
yeah,
And then outsiders that would pour in from Syria just because they wanted the opportunity to try to kill an American. Um, Mostly actually the Iraqi people, a lot of them that we met there though, were decent folks and were happy we were there. I don't know how long they held on to that idea as things progressed and fell apart. Um, but they certainly weren't actively helping someone try to kill us. It wasn't like Afghanistan where the
yeah.
majority of the population is at least sympathetic to the Taliban. So they were very different wars. A lot of the guys that I served with had a harder time coping with Afghanistan than Iraq.
Mhm.
Um, Very much in part due to all the pedophilia they were witnessing and knowing that the people hated us. Everywhere you'd go, you could see the hatred in their eyes for you. Um, it was kind of like our generation's Vietnam in a sense that way. So some guys that I served with, my seniors, they had spent all of their career going to Iraq, getting in gunfights. It was a very kinetic deployment for them, and they could feel somewhat accomplished that they had helped save the Kurds from being genocided by Saddam and all this. The younger guys that served with me, whose only experiences were in Afghanistan, a lot of them were just broken afterwards. So a lot of these guys would get out later and get on drugs or become alcoholics. Um, I lost a lot of guys in my last deployment, but I'm nowhere near how many I've lost to suicides.
Oh yeah. It's really. Sometimes I think that might be the most I'm truly embarrassed to be an American when I just hear about how many our soldiers end up taking themselves out, and there's got soldiers from Vietnam who do it too. It's just this is a
Well,
and I very much believe if you've been in the military, you are entitled to medical care for the rest of your life, especially if you got hurt. That's one thing you
I
earn.
think I think a solution on the healthcare side, and
Yeah.
I think I speak for a lot of guys that have mentioned this to me too. Get rid of the VA, just give us our VA, our disability card, and let us go to a regular private practitioner, and then have the VA just exist to cut a check to them. Instead of having us go to a VA hospital and deal with all that, let us go to our local private practitioner or wherever we're referred out to a specialist. And the VA should only exist to cover the cost, essentially. I think that would fix a lot of problems. I'm no expert, so maybe there's a
Yeah.
better way to do it. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of guys have talked to me and have shared this opinion. As far as the suicides, so less than 10% of GWAT veterans saw combat, but over 40% are diagnosed with PTSD.
Mhm.
Um, to me, that's a little bit damning, but I'm not here to judge and condemn my fellow vets as far as that other 30%. I think the guys that struggle the most, it's not from witnessing death and killing. That's, at least for me, that's why we were there. I'm a Marine. It's my job to kill people.
Yeah.
Um, that never bothered me. I don't lose any sleep from killing people. But things that don't align with your moral compass will eat away at your soul. And I think a lot of the guys that really do have PTSD, I think they either saw or did something that didn't agree with their moral compass. And for a lot of the guys who went to Afghanistan, it was working with pedophiles day in, day out and not being able to do anything about it. That'll eat you up inside. I know it did for me for many years when I got out. I don't struggle with hearing random gunfire. I don't
Mhm.
have flashbacks to combat. That stuff doesn't bother me. I miss my buddies, and every once in a while, I'll have a rough day, especially on some of the anniversaries of some of them getting killed in action. But you grow up and you learn to process it for your family, for your own sake, for your kids. The stuff that still eats me up is those kids over there, what happened to them, and the fact that we are complicit in it by guilt by association, and then we aren't be able to do anything. I think that's with the story of a lot of guys, and I think they don't necessarily want to put that out there, maybe because it's so embarrassing and humiliating. You can't really feel a sense of accomplishment or like you're some kind of badass warrior if you have to admit that all you did was make the country worse, and you were the bad guy helping a bunch of pedophiles. That's hard to come to terms with for a lot of guys,
And that's
especially once they became fathers themselves.
and Danny, unfortunately, that's something that we men do. Whether we're in the military or not, we keep this stuff all bottled up. And
Yeah.
sometimes it just eats us on the inside. Yeah, I've known. I mean, yeah. You joined because you wanted to be the good guys, and then you realize, wait, we're not the good guys. It's just I can imagine what
Wait,
that's.
we're the baddies?
Yeah, we're the bad guys.
Yeah,
It's
it really is
and you
like
see these
I
and you see
I
these
I think
people nothing. I mean, Danny, that's one thing about you went to Afghanistan. You saw what poverty really looks like, and nobody
my
experiences that kind of poverty in America.
no, they have no frame of reference with which
Yeah,
to even compare it with. I spent my 20s killing the poorest people on earth,
yeah,
only to come home and realize America's the most spiritually bankrupt nation on earth. That's the irony.
yeah. It's
A lot of us, when we got out, most of us were right-leaning libertarians while we were in, and I was very much a Ron Paul guy.
yeah,
I think what we saw over there and how much we knew the government was corrupt and complicit in all of this. really served to push a lot of us to be anti-government. I'm not necessarily anarchist, of course, but opposed to our government, at least. And I mean both parties when I say that. A lot of us are right wing, but would never consider ourselves to be conservatives or Republicans because we see both parties as being just two wings of the same bird. I served mainly during the Obama administration, of course. However, the policies that I saw, especially in regards to foreign policy in Afghanistan and the shit show, just disaster of how that whole thing was run, that occurred under four different administrations of both parties. So a lot of us have been turned against both parties. And you've seen the growth of the libertarian movement along with, the more dissident parts of the right because of that. You'll find a lot of veterans in these areas.
Yeah,
And most of them, it's just because they're disillusioned with it. A lot of us no longer think that the current version of the government can be saved because it's so corrupt. And part of that is how filled with rage we are from what we learned about it over there. That was the catalyst for many of us.
yeah, yeah. And Dan, that's what I got to know. Let's say you meet a 16 or 17-year-old in high school and says, "I want to join the Marines." What do you tell them?
Same thing I've told every single one of them since I got out. Don't fucking do it.
Yeah, and
I helped one guy. I helped one guy join because he was going Air Force, and I knew he had a good enough grades and a high enough ASVAB score he could actually do it. But one of my good friends, who's also a former Marine, his son um, looked up to us as like heroes and wanted to emulate us. So all throughout high school, he wanted to be a Marine and he wanted to go infantry and all this. The moment that he was getting ready to try to enlist, go to MEPS and join the delayed entry program, his dad asked me to be the one to talk him out of it because he didn't have the heart for it.
yeah,
To tell him, I don't want you to carry on my legacy that way. And I talked him out of it. I talked most kids out of it. If I went back in time 20 years, I would do it all over again because it made me the man I am today. And I would rather it be me over there experiencing that stuff than someone else having to do it. But if I was 18 years old today, there's no way in hell I'd join. If this country got invaded, I'd let them fend for themselves for a change. And I think maybe America doesn't deserve a Marine Corps anymore. We've been sending our best to die for centuries. Maybe we should send our worst. A lot of us feel this way.
yeah,
Um, not to blackpill everyone, but I don't fly an American flag in my house anymore. I hope that whatever comes next after America is something we can all take pride in again. I look forward to that. And there's a lot of people, American people, that I love and care about. But the culture and legacy of the country, the government and the country, is kind of poisoned well for a lot of us. So, yeah, no, if I was 18 today, I would say, yeah, fend for yourselves, go fight your own war. And it sucks to say that out loud.
yeah.
And
Did
I'm
you
sure that's
ever
going to offend a lot of people, but that's me being honest.
did you ever read any of General Smedley Butler's stuff?
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. And on the other hand, I got to ask, what do you think of Dan Crenshaw?
Don't get me started. I'm not a fan. I'll leave it at that. I
Yeah,
don't want to get too edgy on your platform. I
yeah,
don't know what your specific politics are. I don't want to get too edgy on here. But huge fan of Smedley Butler. He's an American
yeah.
hero. A lot more folks should read some of the stuff he put out there.
Oh, I certainly knocked on doors for Ron Paul. I mean, uh, and I've also I also have if you looked at my shows, I've done a lot. I've talked a lot about Javier Milei in Argentina on here. So
Ron was something because I remember I was right at the end of my career
yeah,
when he ran for president, and I was in California.
Yep.
Liberals were going to vote for him. You know, all the young left-wing people that I knew were pro Ron Paul, had the Ron Paul Revolution stickers on their cars. He was the first person I saw that united people, at least under the age of 50 at that time,
Hmm.
both sides, regardless of what part of the political spectrum you were on. So the fact that he got kind of black-pilled, or not black-pilled, excuse me, blackballed on the major cable networks, I think that might have been the last shot at some kind of a more limited government actually coming to be, or maybe even avoiding this bipartisan, polarized, divided nation that we have now. I think that was always coming down the pipeline, but maybe it wouldn't have happened as soon as it did with Ron. But you know, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I don't know. And I, yeah, have anything else to say about Iraq, or I don't know if there's anything else different to say.
Iraq, um, I mean, obviously there were no WMDs. We all know that now.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I don't know what the
Iraq,
that was.
Iraq was so I don't you're old enough, so I'm sure you probably remember then. Secretary of State Wolfowitz, he was very much a war hawk for Israel.
Yeah.
So after 9/11, um, there had already been a push to want to go back into Iraq before 9/11,
Oh, yeah.
and 9/11 sort of allowed us to kill two birds with one stone in that we got to go after Al Qaeda and Taliban in Afghanistan, go after Osama bin Laden, but we used it as an excuse to continue George Bush Sr.'s crusade in Iraq
Yep.
on behalf of Tel Aviv. Um, See, the reason they wanted Saddam out of power, he had been giving $10,000 rewards out to the families of Quds fighters, right? Quds would be your Palestinian resistance, whether it's PLO or Hamas now, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Anyone who martyred themselves for the cause of Palestine against Israel,
Yep.
Saddam would give the family a payout. And Israel, you know, was pissed about this. So
Mhm.
they were heavily pressuring Washington to do something about Saddam, try to take him out of power. And 9/11 kind of just gave them what they needed and handed it to them on a silver platter. I don't think anyone ever really thought that there was WMDs in Iraq, whether, you
Yeah.
know, nukes or whatever. I don't think that that was ever something that was genuinely believed at the higher levels. I think Wolfowitz just did a good job of applying pressure on behalf of Israel. And this is something that's been written about extensively and documented since I've gotten out. So a lot of people far smarter than me believe this. And
Yeah.
it's also part of the reason why we're in all these things, you know,
Oh, yeah,
not just because of taking action, but the whole Middle East, the dumbest, most illiterate person in Afghanistan knows that we went to Iraq for Israel. They don't know history, they don't speak their own language, but they know enough about geopolitics because of how much it impacts their daily life that they know what we've had to do on behalf of this foreign state and how it's affected them. Same in Iraq. They all know why we were actually there. So you can look back in Iraq with a little bit more a sense of accomplishment than Afghanistan, I guess, in the sense that it hasn't completely fallen apart and it hasn't been taken over by Daesh, by ISIS.
yeah.
Um, it hasn't been taken over by proxies of Iran. So it's still a functioning state. And the Kurds are still alive and have their little corner of it cut out now.
Yeah.
I don't think the people there are as happy with us as they were 20 years ago.
I don't think so either. And that's part of the reason also why some of these Middle Eastern people are going to Europe, because we went in and completely messed up their countries, and they just want to
100%.
go somewhere that's a little more stable. But yeah,
It's a mix of wanting to go somewhere safer and stable. It's also a revenge thing
yeah,
in a way.
maybe
Um,
so too. Yeah. I mean,
you bomb my country and blow it up and kill my cousins, then fine, I'm gonna come use your welfare and, you know, rape some of your daughters. It's also that, and I don't think a lot of people in America know this. Some folks in the UK probably do because they're the ones that it's happening to the most. Is
oh yeah.
So like you go to the UK as a migrant from Libya, Syria, any of these places, right? And you file for asylum. The entire time that you're there waiting to see if you're going to get asylum, they put you up in a nice hotel, they feed you,
Yeah,
they provide for you, they give you a prepaid card and load it with money. Even if you get denied, you get to spend, a year on holiday essentially in London, a year vacation where everything's paid for. So some of them intentionally file claims that they know will never be approved, and they treat it as a year-long vacation. And then at the end of it, the UK has to pay something like £3,000 to ship them back. Well, here's the thing is if they're from somewhere like Afghanistan or Syria, where London doesn't have dialogue with the government, they can't send them back. So even if you go to London and live off of the tea, and then they reject your asylum claim at the end, they cannot enforce it and deport you because they don't have a dialogue with the country of origin to send you back there. We can't fly a plane from London Heathrow to Kabul or Kandahar anymore. So if you're from one of those countries, there's no way for the law to be enforced after you break it.
exactly, yeah, and, I had an uncle and I had cousins who fought in World War II, and I look at myself and said, "Why did" or think of them and I say, "Why did my cousins fight to save this country?" Because they
It's
clearly don't wanna save themselves. It's the
no,
yeah,
I don't know. I
but
have hard conversations with friends and neighbors. I try not to talk politics with
I
people, but
suppose yeah,
they always drag me into it. I think maybe because it affects all of us so much
yeah.
more
I
now.
suppose you
But
probably yeah, did you get to know any British soldiers too or not? I mean,
yes, the area I was at, we actually relieved a bunch of British soldiers when we rotated in there. A bunch of British paratroopers. Um, they were not they didn't believe in the mission very much, I'll put it that way. They were not as gung ho as we were. They were just there to get the experience and maybe throw some pictures on Instagram. The other members of the coalition
yeah,
all had these rules, like how many guys they would contribute, what they were willing to do. And every time you'd have to operate with some other partner nation in the coalition forces, ISAF, you were always hamstrung by the limitations placed on their troops by their government.
well,
Nobody else was excited to be there. Young American guys are excited to be there to get some action or whatever.
and maybe
But
get revenge. Yeah.
the other forces I worked with were never enthusiastic about being sent to Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm not really surprised. Of course, they didn't experience the World Trade Center like we did. And
Yeah,
I
exactly. It didn't affect them the same way.
mean, I knew a guy who, says he got out alive only because he took the right staircase, just it's, but yeah, so,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's become a part of our mythology to an extent. I remember midway through my career in the Marine Corps, I pretty much figured out that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
yeah.
Any idiot pretty much figured that out. And I remember we were just joking about it in the smoke pit between us, how stupid it was. And one guy said, if I'd have known at 18 that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, I'd still have joined up and gone over there because at least we get to, punish someone for 9/11, even if it's not the right person. And that was kind of a universal thing amongst a lot of guys. And, I don't know what light that paints us in, but we didn't know exactly who the people were that were responsible. So we just wanted to punish somebody for it. And I guess maybe to convince the rest of the world to fuck off and leave us alone. So they kind of they use that to their advantage, I guess. You get a bunch of impressionable 18-year-olds full of angst that watched 9/11 happen,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're all filled with rage, and you just figured out a way to channel it. that is useful to your political agenda or your stocks. You got to keep Halliburton making money.
Oh, I know. That's the other thing too. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if we ever had a general president again like Eisenhower. Maybe that would be the solution, but I really don't know. Anyway, well, Danny, I think this is
Mhm.
yeah, I think this is probably a good place to wrap this up. You have anything else to say before we go?
Just that I hope we finally learn this lesson and stop going to foreign countries and making them worse than they already were in the name of stock prices and foreign influence. Let's stop sending our sons to go die in useless wars. No one's going to listen to this advice, of course, but I'm going to say it.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and give it a review. And go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Check out my Substack. And people are giving me money at Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you, Danny Wolf. I'm Chris Baker. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.